Okay, so we are making the large size Central Perk Crossbody bag. I've already cut out and interfaced all of the pieces as indicated in the pattern. Every piece will have shape flex or woven interfacing fused to it. And then the pieces that have fusible fleece, it's cut 1/2 inch out of all the seams to help reduce the bulk. So we'll go ahead and get started on the front pocket. I will take my exterior front pocket panel piece, and I'm going to find my pen, hopefully. Okay, so I'm going to measure down 2 inches from the top, straight edge, and draw a 7-inch line that's centered. Okay, my ruler here is only 9 inches long, and this is wider than that, so I'll fold it to make a center crease. Okay, 2 inches down from the top, and I'm matching up that 4-inch mark with the center. So then to do a 7-inch line, we'll go 3.5 inches from the center on each side. Oops, I went further on that one. Okay, and then 1/2 inch below that, we'll draw another 7-inch line. And then draw 2 lines to connect those. Now on the right side, I have this piece of fusible woven interfacing that I cut out. It is the front pocket zipper facing piece. So it's 2.5 inches by 9 inches long. And we're going to center that on the right side. The bumpy side that's fusible is facing up. And we're going to place that 1 inch down from the top, uncentered. And I'm just eyeballing that, but it just needs to cover the area on the other side where we drew that box. We want that to be centered here. So lay that in place, and then we'll pin it. I'm probably an overpinner. And one more. I just don't want it to shift as I sew. Alright, and then we're going to sew from this side, and we're going to sew all the way around that rectangle that we drew. So I don't know. Let's see if I can position this so that you can see at all. Oh, there's people beeping horns outside. Okay, you can kind of see. The last video I sewed on my domestic machine. This one I'm doing on my industrial just because that's what I'm used to using. But this can definitely be sewn on any home domestic machine as well. I have my stitch length set to 2.5. Just back stitch, and then we're going to sew all the way around that rectangle, right along the lines. Stop with your needle down in the corner to turn. Alright. And back to the starting point. I always backstitch at the start and stop unless I'm putting in like basting stitches that I'll be taking out later. I always do a backstitch to lock my stitches. Okay, and I always trim my threads as I go, just so it's not messy. When I get to the end and I have threads everywhere that I have to cut off. Alright, so now that you've sewn around that box, in the center of the box, a 1/4 inch up, so centered, you'll draw a line that starts 1/2 inch from the end and ends 1/2 inch before you get to the other end. And then from the end of that line to each corner, you'll draw another line. So just like that. And then what we're going to do is cut right along those lines. So let me cut this straight line with my rotary cutter, and then I'll be right back with my scissors to cut those other lines. Okay, so I cut that open, and now I'll cut along each of these right up to the corner, but be very careful and don't cut through the stitches. But get as close as you can. The closer you can get it, the better your corners will look when you flip this the right way. Okay, so now I actually don't have a camera set up near my ironing board anymore. I moved my sewing room, so I'll have to iron this and then I'll come back and show you. But what I find easiest when I'm ironing, I'll iron on this side, I'll push that up and just barely iron over that to fuse that so it's nice and straight and even. I'll do the same thing here. Be careful not to go across this whole piece or you'll fuse it right down on top and that'll be bad. And then I do the same on the ends, just ever so slightly, like 1/8 of an inch maybe onto that. I'll iron that down, and then you'll pull the entire facing through that hole, and it'll be a lot easier to get it straight once you've done that pre-pressing like I said. And then you'll iron it, the bumpy side is here, so the fusible part, and you will iron it down onto the back. And then it will leave you just with a nice hole on the front, which will be where our zipper goes. So I will be right back. Okay, so there's my hole. See how it looks nice. As you're ironing the fusible woven interfacing for the facing piece to the back, if you notice that, you know, it looks a little wrinkled on the front or it just doesn't look how you want it, if you run the iron over it again while it's still hot, you can peel it back up and iron it back down. So sometimes you get wrinkles or it's not quite as perfect as you'd like it to look. You can fix it. Okay, so there's my front exterior piece. Next we need to position the zipper within the hole. I have a 14-inch zipper here. That's the right color that I want. So I'll be trimming it down. I like the stopper. I'll keep the stopper there just because I like the way it looks. And I will see how long I need that to be. And I'm just going to cut off the extra. I just used like a cheaper pair of Fisker scissors that I have for this. Don't cut metal zippers with your good fabric scissors. And I just cut between the teeth. Okay. Now I use a double stick tape. You can also baste this zipper down in place if you don't have double stick tape. Double-sided tape. Whichever one that's actually called. And I don't see where I put that, so hang on just a minute. Okay, so here's the double stick tape I have. Double-sided tape, whichever it's called. I order it from Wawak. I'm not sure the right way to say that. It's WAWAK.com. There's also double-sided tape at tandyleather.com, and I just searched on Wawak for leather tape, I think is what I looked for, and it's really sticky, so it works well. So I'll go on the wrong side, and I sew through this and I don't have a problem. You may want to place it so that it's not within your seam allowance at all if it seems to gum up your needle or you don't like to sew through it. I haven't had problems. If my needle gets sticky, I just kind of scrape it off. Just place that right along the opening on the wrong side. You can put it at the ends too if you find that helpful. I usually don't, but you could put some here too if you wanted. And this will be holding the zipper in place for a little while as we do other things. So make sure you really stick it down good. Or, like I said, you can baste it in place. And if you baste it, you want to do this, the basting stitches further than 1/8 of an inch out so that you can take them out later. Once you do the top stitching, the final top stitching to keep your zipper in place. And the reason why we're not sewing it in place right now is because when you do sew it in place, it's sewing through the lining in the exterior. So we don't do the final stitching just yet. Let's see if I can not stick my zipper pull to that tape. Okay. Get that centered as well as I can from the back. And then I'll flip it over and fix it. That doesn't actually look too bad. This does stick really well, so I mean, it is, you can reposition it, but that should definitely hold our zipper in place until we're ready to do the final top stitch around it. All right, that looks pretty even. So now we are going to sew the pocket gusset and attach it to this front pocket panel. So here are our two pocket gusset pieces. It's cut in two separate pieces for the reason of if you have directional fabric, that it's not going up one side the wrong direction. So we'll just place the two wider ends together, which are the bottom ends, and then sew at 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we're going to press, I'm going to press this open and then top stitch on each side. Okay, the seam is pressed open, and now I'll top stitch at 1/8 of an inch down each side of that seam. I like to use on fabric usually a stitch length of 4 for top stitching. Longer stitch lengths give you a more professional look. But then make sure you always go with a shorter stitch length when you're adjoining pieces. That makes it more secure. Okay, so now we have our gusset pieces attached, and we will fold this front pocket panel piece in half, and I'm just going to finger press the bottom center right here so I can mark that, and then I'll actually mark it with my pen as well. And we'll clip the gusset in place to the pocket. So first I match up the bottom center, and we'll sew this with the pocket panel facing up. So the way I pin it is, or clip, I'll clip it this way, and then we'll ease those corners in. So I always pin the bottom center first and then start at the top, and I'll pin down a few, and then I'll clip out, do a couple clips out from the center of the bottom, and then do the corners last. And I love clips over pins. All right. This might be the hardest part of the whole bag, and it really isn't difficult. The corners can be a little more difficult to ease in just because they're small curves. Bigger curves are easier to ease than tight curves. All right. And you are placing the fabrics right sides together when you do this. Oh, that one went flying. No, just that. All right. So now that's pinned in place, clipped in place, and I sew it with the pocket panel facing up towards my presser foot. And that's at 1/2 inch seam allowance. Make sure you decrease your stitch length. Okay. Always back stitch. And sometimes I like to pull the clip out. I don't know, you can't see that. I'll scooch the clip out so it's just on the edge of the fabric there. So that way it holds everything in place still right next to this presser foot. This presser foot that I use on my Juki is a narrow zipper foot, and I almost never change it. And I actually found one, which I used in the last video for the Consuela clutch, that is a narrow zipper foot, and it was similar to this for the domestic sewing machine. So I had it on my brother, and I really like that foot too. I would say that's comparable to this one. This is my favorite foot for my Juki. So if you have an industrial machine and you don't have this narrow zipper foot, you need it. It's the best. All right, and we just will readjust as we go and make sure that you don't sew over any puckers. And see how it's, I'll show you after I sew it on. I don't know how well you can see under here on the video. Well, and I actually think this is important, the way I do the corners. If you see how I lift the bag up, so I don't know how to explain it. The gusset is flat to the bottom of the machine. It just really goes around curves a lot easier if you lift it up like this, and it keeps that 1/2 inch mark straight along your seam guide. And I really get a lot less puckers doing it like that, as opposed to trying to keep the bag panels flat on the sewing machine bed. And I noticed I get a lot more puckers when I would do it like that. So I always lift it up when I go around curves, and it really helps to sew around those curves nice and smoothly. And then I have this tiny screwdriver that I use. If I get any puckers under there, kind of flatten them out before I sew across that part. So the secret to getting nice curves is really just to take your time. Don't be in a rush. Obviously you can go a little quicker on the straight lines, but take your curves nice and slow. Okay, trim my threads. Alright, that was step 7 that we just completed. Oh, and step 8. Alright, so step 9 is just to trim the seam allowance down to about 1/8 of an inch. Just make sure you don't stitch or cut through your stitching. If you notice any puckers here, it's worth it to take your time and rip out those few stitches and go back over that spot again. Because this pocket's like right in the, you know, front center of your bag. Okay. So we have the gusset attached, no puckers in the corners, nice and smooth. So now we need to repeat that entire process except for step 5, which is putting the zipper in place for the lining pocket panel and the lining pocket gusset. So we will fuse the pocket facing to the wrong side, sew our rectangle, pull it through the hole, and then sew on the gusset. So I'll do that off camera, and I will be back at the beginning of step 10. Okay, so here we have my lining pocket panel with the gusset attached, and I did that in the same way I attached the gusset to the exterior. Now we will be sewing these two together, so we want them right sides together. I'll just flip the gusset on the lining or the exterior, it doesn't matter. And then we're lining up the bottom centers of the gussets, and what we'll be doing is sewing the two raw edges of the gusset together. So I'm going to clip all the way around. I figure by the end of this, more of my clips will be on the floor than in my box. Make sure I have the top edges lined up. And you can also make the bag without this front pocket. That makes it really quick. You could use just the exterior main panel instead of the top and bottom exterior main panels for the front. You could just use 2 of the regular exterior main panel that's used for the back. Use 2 of those and the 2 gusset pieces, and it could be really super quick. Especially if you also left off the back slip pocket. Okay, so I have that pinned or clipped together, and now also at 1/2 inch seam allowance just around that U shape to attach the gussets together. And again, you'll notice that I kind of lift up when I go around the curves to keep that gusset edge nice and straight with the 1/2 inch mark on my, what's this called? My plate. My seam guide, maybe? Maybe I should learn the names of the machine parts before I do videos. Alright. Now we're going to trim that seam allowance down, and I always keep it a real small seam allowance, about 1/8 of an inch. You could do 1/4 of an inch. I just feel like it looks neater when there's less seam allowance left in there. Be careful not to cut through your pocket panels here. Okay, so now we'll turn this right side out. All right, now I'm going to, along this seam here where I just sewed the gussets together, I'm going to press really well. We want the entire lining, pocket lining, to be pushed down inside the exterior pocket piece, like that. So I'm going to go press this seam really well all the way around, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I pressed really well all the way around that seam along the edge of the gussets. And I see I missed a few places. That'll be okay. Okay, now what we want to do is the opening rectangle in the lining, you want to line up with the rectangle opening on your exterior. So to do this, I know that the zipper is centered in the other one. I'm just going to center it in the pocket, or the lining rectangle also. My double-sided tape was a little bit wider than the zipper tape, so it actually sticks out enough that I think it should be able to hold it in place okay. Otherwise, I would put another piece of that double-sided tape down inside on the along the edge of the zipper tape, or on the lining side, either, whatever you find is easier to stick those together. Or you can pin this in place also, which I might actually throw a couple pins in it too, just to keep everything from moving. That tape's not sticking out a whole ton. All right, just line it up as best as you can. All right, let's see. My pins are over here. So I'm just going to put a couple pins in here to keep the lining and exterior fabrics from shifting while I sew around that rectangle. You know what? I haven't used these pins before, and they're really hard to get through. Like, they almost seem like they're sticky, but they're not. Okay, so I think that should hold it okay. And now we're going to top stitch around the zipper, just at 1/8 of an inch all the way around that rectangle opening. And I put my stitch length back to a 4 for this. And I always seem to start at the bottom side of the zipper, at the end where the zipper pull is. I don't know that it matters at all. That's just how I always do it. And you'll back stitch a couple stitches. And then forward. And just take your time and make this look neat. Always stop with your needle down to turn at the corners. Okay, now here I'll be sewing over those metal zipper teeth because they do extend all the way down here. So I just hand crank this so that way if you hit the teeth, you can, you know, raise your needle back up a little bit and readjust so that you sew in between the teeth. I actually didn't hit any of the teeth there, so that's good. And back to where you started. And then just a couple of back stitch a couple of stitches. All right, and we'll trim that. All right, and if you'll see the back, I caught that lining fabric in. And this way we don't have that exposed zipper, raw zipper through the inside of our pocket. I like this, it's nice and finished that way. The pocket will open on the front of the bag. It's a good place to put cell phones, maybe your wallet, anything that you need to access easily or want to keep separate. Maybe put your keys in there so you can find those. All right, so that took us through step 12. So we will go through step 15. No, we'll go to step 16 or 17. Okay, so step 13. We want to take the actual we have the pattern piece for the bottom exterior panel. I should have mentioned this is the large bag that I'm sewing. I don't think I did. We will cut out along this dashed line. And then we'll use this as a template for where to place our pocket. Okay, now you'll want to make sure that when you're tracing this, how do I lose my pen every 5 seconds? Okay, you want to make sure that when you're tracing this on, you use a pen or marker that's erasable. These erase with heat, but they will come back when it's cold. I still use them, and especially right now because I want black so that it'll show up well for you. And I placed the pocket just slightly over where I put the markings, so it should be okay. And right now I have the bottom exterior panel that has the fleece attached to the back. That's important. The other bottom exterior panel that does not have fleece will be for the back pocket. So I just lined that up with the edges, and then you're going to trace around the part where you just cut out. Okay, when I get here to the center mark, I'm going to make a little mark And then I'll just line that up with the center of my pocket. Okay, we'll line this up with the edges on that side. And it looks like my center is off a little bit, so then I'll just actually go in the middle of those two. I don't know if that happens sometimes. I think when you press the interfacing to the fabric, maybe it shrinks, even though I did press my fabric well. Or maybe I didn't have it lined up that great. But no big deal. So now I have my pocket placement marks all the way around that bottom main panel, bottom exterior panel. Okay, and I'll take my pocket, my exterior pocket, and the gusset edge that's sewed together with the lining. We're going to line the center up with that center mark first, and I'll pin that. And I just cover that line I drew with the pocket, so really you won't see it, even if it does come back, but you know, you don't want to use Sharpie or something. All right, and this will look kind of like the pocket's going to look a little puffed up, maybe like it's not right, but don't worry, it is. So now I'll line up that top edge. It's hard to do to get it in the frame of the camera. You're going to be able to see what I'm doing. And then I'll do the other top edge. And the top, see how the top of this puffs out? That's right. That's how it should be. It won't lay flat right now. Okay. And now we'll just go all the way along those placement marks and pin this entire pocket out in place. That was my finger. Okay. Hopefully you don't pin yourself. The curves are probably the trickiest part to line up. Hang on, I'm gonna do this. I'll do all the straight edges first. Do you see how these almost line up on this side? Probably couldn't do that if I tried to. And this fabric that I'm using here is, I think it's from Andover. It's called Dandelions by Sarah Golden for Andover Fabrics. I just really like this mustard color. And it's cute with the pink. Okay, I'm actually not even going to pin those corners. I'll just ease around them when I sew it. Okay. And I have a stitch length of 4 still. And we'll use a 1/8 inch seam allowance and sew all the way around the edge of the gusset to attach the pocket to the front of the bag. And this is step 14. I'll just take my time when I get to those corners to make sure it's nice and even since I didn't pin it down. And make sure also that you're not sewing any puckers onto the corners. Use my little screwdriver that I always use. And take the corners nice and slow, 1 stitch at a time. corner. Okay. Hopefully I did not sew a puffer down there. I don't think I did. No, it looks okay. Alright, back up to the top. And again, back stitch to secure those stitches in place. And trim your threads. Okay, so now just kind of go in here and, you know, make sure everything looks good. I kind of make sure the edges are all popped out nice. It's a good time to, you know, maybe press this while you have access to the whole inside of the pocket. You can get your hand in there if you need to. And then what you'll do is press the corner of the lining, that seam right there along the gusset and the pocket panel. Match that up with the other, the exterior seam. And then you'll lay that seam directly down. Do you see how I'm folding this gusset in half at the top and laying it down directly on top of the seam where the gusset is attached to the bottom panel, the bottom exterior panel. Same thing on the other side. Match up those seams, fold it in half, and lay it right down on top of that seam where the gusset attaches to the bag. And clip that. Okay, now the top should lay nice and flat. And it does. And I'm going to just put a few clips on that to hold everything down. And then we will base the top of the pocket with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And you can use a longer stitch length for basting. It's not your final placement or your final stitches to hold anything together, just to hold this closed and everything in place until we get the top panel sewn on. Okay. Okay. Now I will get the top exterior panel. Okay, here's the top exterior panel. We will line the bottom edge of the top exterior panel up with the top edge of the bottom exterior panel. Place those right sides together and clip along that whole edge. And then we're going to sew those together using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I feel like I need some background music here. It's so quiet. And I keep shaking. Hopefully that's not too shaking the camera too much and giving everybody motion sickness. Okay, now 1/2 inch seam allowance, back to my shorter stitch length. Make sure you back stitch. This is a little thick going through those parts where the pocket is folded over on itself, the gusset. So you might want to hand stitch or hand crank your machine over those parts. Alright, trim my threads. I'm going to go over to the ironing board real quick, and I'm going to press that top panel down with the seam allowance pointing up. Alright, now this is step 17, where we press that top panel up, and now we're just going to, I want it this way, top stitch through the top exterior panel and the seam allowances that are underneath. And I changed my machine back to a stitch length of 4. And again, it might be thick when you go over those pocket gusset areas, since there are several layers you're sewing through. Alright, so that completes step 17, and the front of our bag is now finished. And we will start video number 2 with step 18, and we'll get the back panel assembled.